Thank you very much. I'm a bit overwhelmed. You never know how these things are going to turn out, especially on a rainy night. But I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. Everybody can hear me okay?
No.
No? Okay. There we go. Better? Okay. Listen, I know this is New York City. There's so many other things that people can be doing, so I'm very, very touched that you're here with me to celebrate this book, which has taken me 20 years to sort of publish and get out there. First of all, I want to thank a few people. Kaylin Higgins, who just introduced me, Strand Bookstore. I mean, come on, this is the Strand, New York City. You don't get much better than this. So thank you very much for welcoming me here. A few notes. You can see that there's some cameras around here. I just want to inform you that I'm very proud and very excited that CBS News has a presence here. The CBS News Sunday Morning is filming a segment on me that will be aired sometime in May. So it was scheduled originally for Mother's Day, but it has, for good reasons, it got pushed up a couple of weeks, so I hope you all have a chance to see that. Also, Marianne Jacobson and Helen Schutte have become good friends of mine, but about, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they had this crazy idea that my life was interesting enough to start filming. So it's been a great journey. And we continue to do that, to film and document, and it's been fun. The book, also, I want to acknowledge the designers of the book. Fred Evans and Daniel Korkov. They have a design company called Ludique. I think the book is very beautiful. It's exactly the book that I wanted to see produced. It's simple, it's elegant, it's straightforward, and I hope you all have a chance to see it and perhaps purchase it. And also, Black and White on White, the lab who helped me put this book together, Sergio Patel, Taku Onada, and Nick Bridges. Thank you very much for your help on this. And Jane Westman, who is my publicist, who's done a fantastic job working with me and putting things like this together. There was a New York Times piece recently. I hope you all had a chance to see. There's a great piece that just came out in ArtNet. So I'm very grateful to Jane and her team. And also the New York Foundation for the Arts. This is a project that's sponsored by them, and I very much want to acknowledge them and welcome them as well. And also, obviously, the parents of all the children. I mean, I became a parent in 2014 for the first time in my life, and I can say that it is the best thing that I've ever done. But it has given me tremendous respect for raising children. For 20 years, I've had parents come in with their children and had the experience of photographing them and had my attention completely on them, and as I should, but I sort of forgot about the parents, and it's a tremendous responsibility, and it's wonderful. And of course the authors of the book. I mean, when I first decided that I wanted to publish this into a collection, I decided that I wanted to not just make it a book of the photographs of the one-year-olds, but also have a literary element to the book. So I am extremely, extremely grateful and honored and touched that some of our most respected contemporary writers have agreed to participate in the book. Obviously, Patti Smith I've known for years. She was on board right from the beginning and wrote a beautiful poem. Adam Gopnik, who I think all of you are all New Yorkers in some respect, the New Yorker, Adam Gopnik, Andrew Solomon, and there are two authors that I'm very, very happy to have here tonight, Samantha Boardman, who I will introduce in a little bit, and Susan Orlean, who will both get up and say a few words themselves. Now about the book, and I've told this story many times, and if you've heard it, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it again. It's a group of work that I never really had any intention in making into a body of work. I had photographed children previously and never really was attracted to the idea of photographing children, but I had the great privilege of somebody approaching me and saying that her daughter was turning 1 and if I would photograph her on her first birthday. And I said sure, and I set up the studio and not thinking that much, and did the shoot and didn't think much of it until I started to look through the contacts. I do want to point out that I still shoot film. I'm sort of old school with that, and I process and I print gelatin silver prints for all of these pictures. But when I went through the proofs, something dawned on me that there was something different about this photograph of this child. It didn't look like a baby. It transcended the subject matter to some degree, and you know, subsequently I was referred to another child who was 1, so I approached it in the same way, and again I got a result that I found quite extraordinary. So I word of mouth, and it just kept accumulating, and at first it was sort of a means for me to sort of support my other artwork, which I continue to do, and I continue to exhibit and enjoy doing. But to not acknowledge this as a serious body of my work at this point would be lessening the impact for me. It's one of the most enjoyable things that I do. The amount of joy that I received when I present these photographs to the parents is incredible. I mean, I have brought tears to some parents' eyes, and I mean, as an artist, as a visionary, as somebody who has a focus on something like that, there's nothing greater than to bring the emotion to somebody like that. I want to make this brief because I would like, and I want to welcome questions at the end. So right now, I would like to take a moment to welcome Samantha Boardman. She wrote the introduction to the book. Samantha is a clinical instructor in psychiatry and public health and assistant attending psychiatrist at the Weill Cornell Medical College. Dr. Boardman is the founder of PositivePrescriptions.com, a website that explores how psychology, culture, and science intersect. Amongst other prestigious institutions, Dr. Boardman is a member of the Board of Trustees at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a board member of City Meals on Wheels, and council member of New York Presbyterian Hospital and Weill Cornell. And I also want to point out that Samantha is not only one of the contributors to the book, but she's also a parent of 2 of the children that I've had the pleasure to photograph. And for that reason, I think her insights have particular relevance. So please welcome Samantha Boardman.
Such an honor to be here, and what an honor it is to have my children photographed by Edward. This was so special, the moment, and I can describe it later, but my son just turned 10, and every time I look at this picture, it takes me back, and it's very humbling because I can sort of project onto him who I thought he was going to be, and there's nothing that we can create, and it's sort of this wonderful reminder that we cannot sort of design or sculpt these children into who we might want them to be. And it's why I was so sort of thrilled and honored to be asked to be a part of this project. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. On the brink. Babies are born curious. The entire industry of baby proofing is built on this fundamental human instinct. As their senses and abilities develop, their sense of wonder expands too. Undaunted by fear, they venture into the unknown with great interest and unbridled desire to know and understand more. We hear a lot about the terrible twos, but people forget to tell us about the wild and wiggly ones. By the age of 1, children are determined, unstoppable little warriors. I vividly remember my daughter's favorite words, "do by self," whenever I tried to help her put on her shoes or stand up. "No" and "mine" were other favorites. So like other children her age, she had a will of her own. You could see it in her eyes. That look is what I love so much about Edward's photographs. They so perfectly capture these little beings on the brink of personhood. They're bursting with energy and this insatiable craving to discover the world around them. The curiosity is palpable. Everything is new and interesting to a 1-year-old child. Their little bodies and their minds are yearning to break free and just explore more. And the tranquility of the photos is an illusion. It's this micro moment of stillness before the child wiggles out of the special chair that Edward had holding them upright. So what happens to this raw curiosity? At what age do we unlearn and decide to just play it safe? You cannot look at these photographs and not wonder what it feels like to be curious and without fear. They remind us to keep an open mind, to challenge received notions of truth, and to rethink everything that we think we might know. Asking questions lies at the heart of curiosity, and cultivating it. Preschool children, on average, ask their parents about 100 questions a day. Why, why, why? And sometimes parents just wish it would stop. Tragically, it does stop. By middle school, they pretty much stopped asking. It's no coincidence that this is at the same time when student motivation and engagement plummet. They don't just stop asking questions because they've lost interest. It's the other way around. I think they've lost interest because they stopped asking questions. Young children are the best teachers we could have. According to Harvard psychiatrist George Vaillant, how one answers the question, "What did you learn from your children?" predicts how well someone will age. Some parents believe children should absorb their own wisdom like obedient sponges. And for these parents, the thought of learning anything from a child is preposterous. But in comparison, the belief that one can learn a great deal from children reflects an openness to change. It is no surprise that these more flexible thinkers tend to age better. They don't get stuck in how the world used to be or how it should be. We have a lot to learn from the wide-eyed 1-year-olds depicted in these photographs. They are experts in curiosity, creativity, and wonder. And thanks to Edward Mapplethorpe, we have the privilege of basking in it.
Thank you, Samantha. That was beautiful. And that did remind me that one thing I want to say about this book is whenever I look at the photographs, and I just made the comment back before we came out here that I wish I had the opportunity to have the experience of going through the book for the first time. Obviously, I've seen the photographs many, many times, but I still get the sensation and the energy of hope and promise that these children give, that they show in the photographs. I mean, we live in difficult times, and the world is a tough place, and I think, the children are the future. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's certainly the case, and I just love how innocent and pure and promising all those little faces that look back at me are. So I just wanted to mention that, and with that I want to introduce Susan Orlean, who I'm very happy to have here tonight. Susan is a staff writer at the New Yorker. She's been a staff writer at the New Yorker since 1992. And she's the author of 8 books, including The Orchid Thief, which was the inspiration for the movie adaptation, which I imagine you're all familiar with. Book Rin Tin Tin, which was a New York Times notable book of the year. And The Bullfighter Checks Her Makeup, a collection of profiles and essays. In 2008, she published Lazy Little Loafers, a book that explored why babies are so lazy and how they get away with doing nothing most of the time. And on a personal note, I did buy that book when I was looking to find people to perhaps lend their voice to my book. And once I read that, I was like, I got to contact Susan and see if she'd be willing to participate, because it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And I think it's more for adults. But do have a chance to read that book. On a side note, I just want to mention that Susan recently collaborated with the artist Philip Taff on a book called The Floral Ghost, and they will have a book launch tomorrow night at Rizzoli. So please welcome Susan Orlean.
Try. How's that? Okay. Thank you, Edward and Samantha. I'm so thrilled to be part of this. When I got the email from Edward describing the book and asking me if I'd be willing to contribute an essay, I thought, well, I write more about animals than people these days. Am I a good fit? Though I do write about humans more often than not. But he sent me some digital files to look at, so I had an idea of what this was about, and I was so struck. The photographs are so extraordinary, and it's such a gorgeous book, and being part of it just seemed like a privilege. I was so happy that it came about. The thing that it did for me was looking at the potent, really powerful look on these kids' faces reminded me vividly of an experience that I'd had as a teenager, and that's what I decided to write about. So I'm going to read this essay, which is called The Look. And I have to thank Edward for having had the opportunity to be reminded of this experience, and of course to be part of this gorgeous book, and something that I'm really proud of. The Look. The first time I was alone with a baby was one muggy afternoon in the lazy, aimless summer between my sophomore and junior years in high school. This might sound shockingly late in life for a girl to solo for the first time with an infant. And even now, thinking back on it, realizing how old I was, remembering how many other firsts I'd already had by then, I'm astonished. But at the time, I didn't actually know a single baby. I was the youngest of 3 kids, the youngest of all my cousins, one of the youngest of the gang of children that populated my neighborhood. I was the youngest in my class at school by almost a year. I was used to being the baby, not used to being around anyone younger than me. When I reached the age of capitalism and was seized with the desire to make money, I didn't skew toward the obvious choice of babysitting, even though most of my friends had discovered what a gushing revenue stream it was. I was so oblivious to children that babysitting never occurred to me. Motherhood was simply an abstract concept. I planned on having quite a few kids, perhaps 6, when the time came. But until then, they were as notional to me as life on Mars. I did want to work, but what I wanted was to be an attendant at a gas station, or an exercise walker at the thoroughbred track near my parents' house. There was not even a nanosecond during which my parents considered allowing me to do either one of these. So I was stuck piecing together odd jobs, walking the neighbors' dogs, helping my mother weed the garden. That summer, the one when I was a restless 15, too old for camp, too young to do a proper job, a new family moved onto our street. My mother told me they were a young doctor and his wife. The moving truck arrived one warm morning, and I wandered down the block to watch. After the truck disgorged their boxes and furniture, out came a pile of infant things. A stroller, a playpen, a high chair, a bouncer. Some items I couldn't identify, but because of their glaring color and plastic sheen, I knew they belonged to someone young, a baby on our block. I went back to weed the garden. My mother belonged to the generation that believed in welcome wagons, so the next day she whipped up a batch of cookies and collared me, and we marched down the street to say hello. Mrs. P met us at the door, and we made our way in through the obstacle course of moving boxes. She was dandling her baby, who was fat and pink and had her dark hair tied up in a bow on the top of her head, so it fanned out like a tiny palm tree. Mrs. P and my mother got acquainted while I sat in a grumpy heap. The baby was named Sharon, and she sucked on a pacifier and fixed me with an unblinking gaze. I stared back. We stayed locked in this eye-to-eye standoff until my mother poked me a few times, making cheerful noises. While I had been staring down Sharon, it seems, I'd been hired to be a mother's helper for the rest of the summer. Whether Mrs. P knew of my complete lack of experience with babies, I'll never know. But I suspect she did, because most of what she had me do was fold laundry and empty the dishwasher and set the table and unpack boxes while she tended to Sharon. Otherwise, I would have had to admit to her that I had never in my life held a baby, had never changed a diaper, knew not one iota about baby husbandry. The truth was actually bigger than that. It wasn't just that I was mystified by babies, I was terrified of them. Sharon was a placid, burbling little girl, but she was also, now and again, fitful and belligerent and weepy and implacable. In other words, she was an entirely typical baby. To me, though, unfamiliar with the infant disposition, she seemed like a tiny human bomb, silently ticking, waiting to be set off by something invisible. And when she wasn't wailing or fussing and was content and quiet, she had that gaze, steady, intent, patient, that unhinged me. I was convinced she was taking my measure, seeing my inexperience and terror, knowing my soul and all its inadequacy. She seemed wise, and I felt small. I hoped my duties would stay limited to household chores, but one afternoon, Mrs. P said she had to run to the store and that I should stay behind with Sharon. I stammered, but she had already gathered up her pocketbook and after a pat on Sharon's head, headed out the door. The house was suddenly dead quiet. A clock somewhere clicked off the seconds. Sharon was in her playpen, noodling around with a toy. I convinced myself that if I didn't breathe, everything would remain fixed, quiet, manageable. I would just sit here, and in no time, Mrs. P would return. I eased myself into a chair. My heart was thudding. After a moment, Sharon looked up at me, solemn and still. I looked at her. She looked at me. And then, with perfect timing, we both began to cry. I will never know if my mother and Mrs. P had planned this, or whether it was pure and simple coincidence, or whether my mother was gifted with that mother's instinct that hears all and knows all, and simply felt the tug to come down the street. But as we two babies sobbed and sniffled, my mother suddenly, magically materialized at the front door. This made me cry even more, out of relief and embarrassment, and a sudden upwelling of awe and wonder at my mother. She gathered us both up, her arms as big as the world, and blotted Sharon's tears, and then mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I think you all can understand why I was very excited to have Susan participate in the book. I realized that I forgot to acknowledge Powerhouse Books, the publisher of this book. You know, they decided to take a risk that other publishers would not, and I owe them a debt of gratitude for doing that. Like I said, this is 20 years of work, and it's taken me 20 years to be able to get up here and welcome you all and speak to you all, and it's quite touching. I'm hoping that some of you, and I do see people that have come from out of town as well, and that's really, really amazing, and thank you. I do hope that some of you have some questions. I've asked Samantha and Susan to make themselves available as well. So I would like to open the floor if anybody had some insight or comments or question for me. Yes, sir.
So when you're taking these pictures, is there some element of their personality that you kind of make a prediction about how their life's going to unfold?
The question is whether I have some sort of insight into how these children's life is going to unfold. No, I mean, I don't have a magic crystal ball.
Just like their personality or some element of their personality?
You know, it's a very, very interesting experience because, you know, the child and the parents will come to the studio. Most often, in fact, I'd say 90% of the times, I've never met neither the parents or the child. We have a quick reading, and we relax just a few minutes. Of course, the studio is set up, and I ask the parents to be prepared to bring the child into the set pretty quickly. And the reason I do that is I have found over the years that while the surrounding and the environment is still new and fresh and somewhat interesting to the child, they're more curious, and there's a curiosity there. We get the child into the seat. I ask the parents to step aside out of earshot, eye shot, and I start photographing. And there is a strobe, it's a flash, and that flash of light is sort of a window into their personality. Some children are very curious and very wide-eyed and excited by that, and other children are reserved and intimidated and scared by that. And I think, to answer your question, I think that's when things start happening from that very first flash. I mean, I don't know the child, I can't predict. I think the editing process after I'm done is more of where I start personally putting my sort of vision into the selection. Clients, parents do not see the results of the shoot. I take that very seriously, the editing process. I go through the proofs and the context and make a general sweep of them, and then keep narrowing it down to 2 images. And what I like to shoot for or look for is that one of the images is sort of, it's the nice image that when the parent is going to like, is going to enjoy, and I feel sort of comfortable that they'll be happy with that picture. And then I always choose one that's a little bit more challenging, and it's more contemplative, I guess you could say. And I always tell the parent that I feel personally that that's the better picture. I know that it could take some time for them to sit with it and to look at it, and it may take years, but more often than not, when I do speak to those parents years later, they're like, you know what, there's something about that picture that you captured, and they're grateful for it. So it's, you know, when you create and when you're taking pictures or when you're painting, you know, you don't ask these questions. You just sort of like let things sort of happen, and I'm just blessed, I guess, to be able to have these children open up their hearts to me. So, thank you for the question. Yes?
As a new teacher, I've been reading a ton of articles with young children, and I've been finding that it becomes easier and easier to work with different classrooms, going into substituting and this and that. And part of it is building rapport. Have you found that your work has changed from the time you started shooting these pictures to the end in terms of their comfortability with you and thus the work your pictures?
I think the question in a nutshell is if things, I mean, if my...
Has your work changed because of the rapport you wanted to build?
Has the work changed with the rapport that I've built over the years? A simple answer is no. I don't feel it has. The world has certainly changed. I had somebody ask me a question just yesterday, and I realized that in 1995, when I took the first picture in this series, which is the image on the cover, and who is 21 years old now, I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a cell phone, and so the world has changed. But I think I treat each child very, very as an individual, and you know, it's an hour of time that perhaps I have with them.
An hour? Oh, that sounds like a special kind of torture.
Well, it can be over. Good point. It can be over quite quickly, but you know, I got to say, you know, there are times that that child is wonderful, and I just keep shooting until I know I have the picture, and then I oftentimes will have the parent come, and then we sort of pull out every trick in the book and try to get some other reaction. But my rapport hasn't really changed. I just, you know, I always have a knot in my stomach each time I do this because I have no idea who's going to walk into that door. And I don't know what their demeanor is going to be like. I try to let the parents know that, you know, we just have to, I don't have a lot of negotiation with that child, so if, in fact I have no negotiation with that child. So please accept that child, how they are that day. You know, we all have good days, we all have bad days, we all have restless nights, and that's okay. It's okay to choose to have your child photographed with a frown on their face or concern on their face. I mean, there are plenty of studios that take photographs of babies and children, and you know, that they're looking for that cute picture, and I admire that. But it's not anything that I'm interested in doing. They do it very well, but I will leave that for them to do. I'm much more interested in the psychology of the portraits. So, but thank you for the question.
How do you select your children?
I have to say that most of them come to me. It's been an amazing journey because it's mainly been word of mouth for the last 20 years. I mean, with this book and with the wonderful press that I've gotten and standing up in front of all of you, perhaps, you know, that will change some, but it has been. I wish I had kept sort of a lineage of who's connected me with who. I can see somebody here right now who has been an amazing early portrait. Her child was an amazing portrait, and she connected me with a lot of people, so that's how it happens. That's how it happens. Yes?
I'm curious about, I don't know how other baby photographers do it, but your choice to have the parent out of the picture for a little while. And then you said sometimes they might come back and try to get reactions out of the kid. And can you talk about, like, is there parental anxiety about leaving your child with the photographer for up to an hour? How do you deal with that?
Well, all right. They did not leave their child with me for up to an hour. I was more referring to the fact from the moment that they walk into the studio and by the time they leave the studio, it's probably an hour process. I think I make it quite clear when I'm speaking to the parents before they arrive. I give them, it's almost a laundry list of instructions. You know, don't arrive with any toys in their hands, pacifiers in mouths, Cheerios, eating Cheerios or anything like that. Anything that could be difficult to take away from the child. So try to avoid onesies so the shirt just lifts off really quick. So it's, I don't know, I am now a parent, and it was an interesting day for me when I photographed Harrison. He turned 1 last September, and I was curious how I was going to be that day, because I was, for the first time, not only the artist and the photographer, and I had a job to do, but I was also a parent, and how was I going to react with that situation? Now I have to admit that with my own child, just like every other child, it's all about the baby. It's all about the picture. I take it very seriously. As I said, there's always a knot in my stomach, and there's always a little bit of anxiety involved in it. But that day, I can say that I definitely wore the professional hat. The pressure was on. I mean, it was my own child, and the pressure's always on. But I'm very, very happy with the picture. And I did not plan this. When I went to Powerhouse, I don't remember the date, but I had told them that my wife was pregnant, and the book was originally planned to come out in Christmas time, in which case that Harrison would not have been included, or been a possibility to be included. But it got pushed to Mother's Day. It was sort of, this is all about Mother's Day sort of launch here. And Harrison was the last one to be sort of slipped in there. And I'm proud of that. I have dedicated the book to Harrison, but I also acknowledge all the parents, as I spoke to earlier. One thing that I do want to point out is the fact that there's no names connected to any of these portraits. That decision was made very, very early on. I never wanted to associate, put a name or a label. It's almost like a label on any of these children. They're all titled by their little specific birth time, the day, the week, and the time of their birth. I think that's their little moment, and that should be theirs. Some of the children are from prominent families, some are from moderate families, and we're all on equal playing ground at 1 year of age, and it was very important for me to make that point and to leave a bit of mystery. And I also like the fact that you're not quite sure whether it's a boy or a girl. I was working with somebody digitally, the person who I worked with Digital Tech, I'm sure is here today, Ariel, and he always had it wrong. He's like, oh, he's cute. I'm like, well, that's a girl. She's adorable. Oh, that's a little boy. So I leave it up to you to decide how you like that quality of the book. Yes?
What criteria went into choosing which portraits and then the order? Because it's not
that was very, very difficult. I had to do the editing myself. I was really the only one who knew whose child was who. I had to be very sort of sensitive to that. There are some families that I had photographed 2 or 3 of their children, and if I had my choice, I would have put every one of the photographs in there, but it's just not possible. So I had to make educated and thoughtful decisions of who to put in and who not to put in. I have then when it came to the order, I threw my hands up and I was like, I knew somebody who has edited lots and lots of books. He's a friend of mine. and I asked him if he would be gracious enough to put the order. And I was with him, and it was an interesting process. He was so sort of like, I don't know, his thought process was just so interesting, and how he sort of put them in groups. And I mean, I knew that I had these beautiful essays, and they were going to be almost chapters. So there were groups of 15 photographs, and then another essay. So we put them into 4 groups of 15, and then we looked at them and looked at them again, and then we came up with the order. And he said, you're free to change whatever you'd like. And I was like, I don't even want to think about it. Yes?
I heard someone say Edward's special chair. So the set, I'm curious about.
Yeah, from the flea market, we all used to love those flea markets on 26th Street, didn't we? We missed them, we all missed them. There was this little chair, and it was from the 50s, and I thought, wow, I said, I think I can use that one day. And I had it, and I took it, and in fact, I bought others on eBay because they're too perfect for me, because they have a low back, but they support the child. I'm able to secure it down to a solid base, which everything is secured. I have to say, the first few, I don't know what I was thinking, but I didn't think the parents would like me putting a belt around them and strapping them in. So I was, here, and then worried that the kid was there, and so I would be back and forth. But it didn't take me long to realize, okay, we got to, at utmost, the security and the safety of the child is the most important. But it's simple. I mean, for anybody who takes photographs, it's just a single light source. I have cards that fill, and it's the most simple setup that one could create. And well, I learned that from my brother. You certainly don't need to have an elaborate setup to take an interesting picture, but it lends itself certainly to this subject matter, because the babies are so pure and so innocent, and there's no reason to, cast any shadows. And to answer your question, yes?
Now that you are a father and you know so much more about babies, has it changed any aspect of your methodology or your emotions, or is it still just about the work?
Well, like I said, my discovering the amount of energy that goes into parenting has changed tremendously. But I think when it comes to the work, the question is whether being a parent now has changed my approach. And I think as far as the work is concerned, I don't know whether that has made any really relevant changes to the way I look at the subject. And but come on, one more. Yes, here we go.
Has it changed the way you view children? Being a parent now all of a sudden? You've been doing it for a long time. Now all of a sudden you have a 1-2-year-old almost.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows what it's like until they are a parent. I certainly didn't, and I feel very honored and privileged to have met so many children and babies. I'm the youngest of 6, so I grew up with lots of nieces and nephews, so I think I had a sort of natural connection to younger children. But even though after 20 years doing that, I was not prepared for the responsibility that parenting takes. My wife and I, Michelle, we take it very seriously. We love our child, as I'm sure everybody who has children do. But no, to answer your question, it hasn't changed.
So I wonder, now that you have a child who's going to be more than one, 5 and 10, 18, are there other moments that you could imagine? Like I was thinking of like 18 or 21 or some other moment? Or is there something
Well,
that's really about the baby, about the oneness?
I think I will always put my main attention on 1-year-olds. I'm not done. I'll never be done with this. This is something that will be my life's work, part of my life's work. You know, I had the thought, and this is sort of a silly thought, of start photographing 2-year-olds. And I think it mainly came out of my desire to like the idea of having a second volume titled 2. But then I realized, I was like, you know, there's something very, very special about that first birthday. I mean, you're only one once. I mean, yes, you're only 2 once, but it's something momentous about that first birthday when that personality just sort of comes through. They're able to sit on their own. Their motor skills are enough. There's attention there. So I think I'll leave it at 1, but it's an interesting question because the girl who is on the cover, her name is Dashiell. I have been in contact with her. CBS has gone down and interviewed her and her mother. So if you do see the segment, you'll see what she looks like all grown up. And in June, she's going to be coming back to New York, and I will photograph her now that she's an adult, 21. The series started off on a slow roll, so the first few years there weren't a whole lot, but I will follow up with all of them. I mean, that's another 20-year project. I mean, I'll be a much older man by the time that book comes out, but hopefully it will, and hopefully I'll be standing here, and hopefully you'll all be in the audience asking me other questions. So, okay, just we have one more question. We have 2 more questions. Okay, Stephen, quickly.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if in the 20 years of shooting babies, has it affected the way that you shoot other subjects?
You know, my work has changed dramatically over the years, and I have a lab. I have a dark room. Do you remember dark rooms? I do have a dark room. It's in the ground level of the building I live in. I concentrate on using that as my tool. The work has gotten very abstract and very about process. So the mechanical camera, film camera, doesn't come out that often right now. It comes out when the babies comes out. But having said that, I do have a show coming up in Berlin at the end of this year, and it's a conceptual idea, but I will be shooting film and cameras with that. And just one last question? Yes?
So, we talk a lot about the babies. I would like to hear a little more about the parent. The first time they see the photograph after you deliver it, how do they generally react? Have there been any interesting reactions? Do they discover something new about the baby?
Did you all hear that question? Which is a good one. Like I said, I make a choice of 2 choices, a choice of 2 photographs. I always present the one that's easier for the parent to look at first. I sort of hook them that way. And, you know, sometimes it's tears of joy come over them. It's, I think with the proliferation of iPhones and digital cameras, and people are taking pictures and pictures and pictures of their children, and you know, it's always, they look like they're kids, you know, and when I turn that print over, it's a 2024 print, it's larger than life. All of a sudden it's like, wow, this is not a baby, this is a person, and this is overwhelming. And I am so disappointed. There are times when it's not possible for the parent to come over and for me to present the photograph. I mean, it sort of makes it all worthwhile for me, but, you know, I understand, but, and then when I turn the second one over, I get a similar reaction. I can tell that there's a little more of a unease, perhaps, but I sort of enjoy that moment because I know that, you know, you're going to be calling me in a few years and you're going to be saying, you know what, you're right, that is the better picture. So, but anyway, I just want to wrap this up. I want to thank you. I am pretty overwhelmed. You know, like I said when we first came, I didn't know how many people were going to be here, and I see so many people from my past and my life, from college, and people that I see often, but my family, my sister Nancy and her daughter are here. Obviously my wife, people that live in my building, people from California. It's really great, and I think I'm grateful for you coming for me, but I have a feeling that it might have to do with the subject matter. I think people, whether you have children, you have families or not, we tend to love babies, and babies are just wonderful creatures, and they're uplifting and warm and cuddly, and if you don't have one, think about it. I'll leave you on that note. Thank you very much.